Hi. I thought we were going to have something to eat, and then I was going to start talking. But it's just a great privilege to be here, and it's quite a surprise to be here. I didn't expect to be here. I live out in Broken Hill, out in the wild, wild west, and the dry west, I should say. And I spoke at the ICE inquiry just recently about my experiences and some of the things that I'd probably like to happen when it comes to that drug. And I suppose one of the things I would like to happen is that we stop actually talking about the drug and maybe start talking about the people who are in trouble for using the drug or because they're using the drug. So that's one of my big things I'm trying to change or trying to advocate for, definitely. So, and the Sydney Morning Herald did a little bit of an article, and Eleni read it and said, I have to meet this person, and we've been on Messenger pretty much since that day. So, and it's been really great to develop that connection and to be here tonight. So, just before I do start with the story, the people that actually brought me here or got me here, which is flew me up from Broken Hill, flew me to Canberra, took me to the football last night, drove me up from Canberra as well today, met me for breakfast, met me for lunch. We've probably got a combined jail time of about probably 40 plus years between them. So one guy I met in Long Bay, and I used to run some just sort of ad hoc groups in there. I worked in Long Bay for 17 years, and I used to run some sort of ad hoc groups in there, and one of the guys that came to the group was a bikie and a big heavy dude, and he was part of like this big business and stuff in jail, and they were all using a lot of drugs in jail. But they used to come to this group, and this one guy turned up, and I said, very, very outgoing, very entrepreneurial, very big personality, and a pretty sort of outrageous sort of guy, you know. But behind all that was like a lot of pain. And I remember the first group he came to, I said to him just before he went back into the wing, and I didn't know his name yet. They used to just come anonymously, and we'd sort of chat and stuff, and they'd go back into their wings. And I said, mate, come over here. And he goes, what? I said, just come over here for a second, let's have a chat. I said, it's really great that you come to group, and I really enjoy you being here, and you bring a lot to the group, and you're a great talker and stuff. But next time you come, leave all the bullshit back in the yard and just sort of come back into the group and see if you can learn something. And I was a bit cocky, I was a bit of a smart ass, and I was a bit sort of not really sure exactly what I was sort of doing at the time. But he came back to the group, and that was about 16, 17 years ago, and he got released from prison eventually. He got moved around the state a fair bit because he was in a lot of trouble. He spent a lot of time in segregation and a lot of time causing trouble. But every jail he went to, he'd send me a card, you know, and he says, I went to this group and I talked to this person. It was never good as your group, but I did the group. And he'd go to another jail and he said, I went to this jail and they run this group. It was never good as your group, but I'm here now. And he sent me probably 8 or 10 of these cards every time he got moved to another jail. So he left prison. He got into a little bit of trouble for a little while, and then he started to work for a cousin of his and started to find his feet and started to build up. And he stayed in touch. He'd give me a ring every now and then and says, oh, Andrew, I mucked up again. And without the M, there was probably an F in there, but I sort of mucked up again and I'm in a bit of trouble. And I said, you're all right, mate, just hang in there, stay with it, you've got some good stuff going on, you're really, you're worth more than what's going on, and I think you've got a great potential. And I just kept feeding that to him, and he just sold a company recently, just this year, that turned over $120 million last year. And he hasn't used drugs for a long time, and he organised to get me up here, and the guy I met for lunch, he's done over 20 years in prison for armed robberies and bank robberies and stuff, and he's also now been totally drug-free for over coming up to 20 years himself. And I met him for lunch today, and he's going to pick me up and take me to the airport tomorrow. And these guys are, and I suppose in a sense like myself, we were the people that people don't like as people. We don't want these people in our communities, we don't want these people in our worlds, we don't want these people in our lives. And it's interesting, the people when I sort of reach out or hold the hat out to to get something for someone, these are the guys that always step up, and these are the guys that always go out of the way to do this stuff. And I also worked in a program in Long Bay called the Narranura program that ran for 18 years, which was one of the most successful programs in corrective services, and it closed, of course. Can't be having success now, can we? And but before that closed, I actually got a guy up that wrote a book about his experience, and he'd spent a lot of time in Pentridge and stuff like that. And the people I went to get him up was the graduates of that program that were living in the community and working and that were actually earning their money. And I went around to them and held the hat out, and and they chipped in all this money to bring this guy up and to spend a few days with the inmates and to talk about their story. So I guess it's just that little bit of an intro into, I guess, the potential of maybe some of the people that we might consider maybe being the worst of the people in the community, and I think there's a way to meet people that can really change their lives, and I think I really believe myself through having a second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, I don't know how many chances I've had, a lot, that I've got a responsibility to to try and talk to these guys, and I do, so. But anyway, my story is, I was born on the 31st of July 1963, and things sort of went downhill from there. So I was a forced adoptee. My mother was pregnant at 18, and she was sent to St Anthony's Catholic Women's Home or Catholic Home in Croydon. When she gave birth, she was taken to Royal Women's Hospital in Darlinghurst, and I always believed that she saw me when I was actually born, but apparently she didn't. There was a barrier between her and me being born, and I was born and they took me away. And I found out three things happened when I was 7 years old. I found out I was adopted. We moved towns, and I had to repeat second class because of my age. So those three things affected me in a way that it didn't affect other people that had been in those situations. And when I found out those things, I went, well, there's no point learning anything anymore. The family I'm in doesn't belong to me, so I'm actually on my own. And I don't really like living in this town. I'm not going to participate with anyone in it, and I'm going to fight all the people that I sort of come across. And my two sisters, who are in exactly the same situation, have got great lives and have always had great lives. And they finished school, and they got jobs, and they got careers, and they had families, and they had children, and they just sort of went through life, just easily. And I used to watch them from the outside thinking, how do they do that? How do they just make friends easy? How do they go to work easy? How do they do school easy? How do they get on with mum and dad easily? And all that stuff I just found it really difficult, But the thing I found easy was fighting, running away from school, getting lick-on tattoos all over me from bubblegum, and smoking cigarettes. And I was a 7-year-old, and I was doing all these things, and I see, it's funny, I see 7-year-olds now, and they're only like this big, aren't they? And they're not very big people, And imagine this little me 7-year-old kid, lick-on tattoos all over me, being caught up somewhere, nowhere near school where I was supposed to be, cigarettes, fighting some kid. I used to fight this kid that lived down the road from me every single day, But we'd hang out on weekends, And I thought he had a colour TV because the screen had broken. He had plastic across it, which was sort of red, white and blue across the screen. So I used to hang out with him because of his colour telly. But at school we'd fight every day, And it'd be like, Andrew's going to go and fight Carl, And the group would be behind me, 40 people. And off I'd go. And there'd be poor old Carl, And actually when I was 14, he beat me. And I stopped fighting him after that, And the reality was I wasn't a brave person, I wasn't a courageous person, I wasn't a dangerous person. I was full of fear, and I was full of anxiety, and I was full of self-hatred, and I was full of, I had an emptiness within me that I didn't really know what it was like. It was like I felt separate, I suppose. I felt separate from the world, I felt separate from my friends, I felt separate from what was going on, and it was almost like I was sort of on the outside looking. I don't know if you've seen the TV show The Dome, and it's got this sort of dome that forms over this town, and it was like, I always felt like I was living on that side of the dome, I was just looking in and think, how do they do that? How do they actually do that? And I had no idea, you know. But what I did know how to do was like to get into trouble and to sort of thing. But I had a lot of needs. I didn't know what the needs were. You know, I got the cane a lot at school, got in trouble a lot at school. There was a lot of violence at our school from the teachers, from the monks and the nuns and the monks. I remember going through that period where I was just getting in trouble all the time. I was getting the cane every day. I remember going up to the principal's office one day and I just sat there and she said, "What are you doing here?" So, "I'm going to be here soon." So you might as well hit me now and I can go back and do what I have to do, you know. And it became this thing that I had no fear of I had no fear of authority. I had no fear of doing the wrong thing. I had no fear of getting in trouble, and I became really, really, really comfortable with getting into trouble, you know. So, and any form of success I would sort of almost have, I sabotaged, you know. It's like I wasn't allowed to be successful. I wasn't allowed to actually achieve. So I remember I had a great teacher, and she liked my stories. I used to write these crazy stories, you know, about people riding push bikes underwater and, you know, all this sort of stuff and, you know, through the sea and doing all this business. It was all, you know, and she laughed. She used to laugh at my stories, and it was like, I remember doing really well in that class. And just before I got to the end, I remember putting a $5 note in the donation jar. It was a Catholic school and had donation jars, and kids would drop in 1 cent pieces and 2 cent pieces, and I think I was 8 or 9 at the time. And I put this $5 in there that I'd stolen, because I used to steal money. And and I remember it was like all of a sudden that part of my school life and that little bit of trying to succeed sort of ended right there and then, you know. I was kicked out of that class, I got into all sorts of trouble, and Mum had to give up work, and I think I was just lost, you know. I was just lost. I didn't feel a part of anything. I didn't feel I belonged to anything. I really felt like I was the only one that was in the world, you know. I was the only one I had to look after the world. I remember thinking as I was growing up and getting older, I remember feeling really like I started to feel feelings. I think like the last speaker talked about starting to feel feelings, and I felt inadequacy. I started to sort of notice I was having feelings, you know, and I started to feel inadequate. I started to feel insecure. I started to feel self-conscious. I started to feel, you know, some loneliness. I started to feel some disconnection, and I didn't know what to do with that stuff, you know. So what I did was I started thinking about different sort of career-y sort of things, and, you know, and then I sort of got lots of real tattoos. I started getting into lots of real fights. I started to get into lots of real stealing. I started to get in lots of real trouble, you know, with the police and things like that. And the houses I used to rob when I was this is before I started using drugs, were the places that were closest to me. So the next door neighbours, it was almost like our house was here and the 3 houses behind were the ones that I robbed. So, and I'm not sure if I was just a lazy criminal or if I was, I don't know. I don't know. And I got caught anyway for all of them. But, and I cried, but I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel remorse. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel sorry for what I'd done. I felt I need to do something so I don't get in too much trouble, you know. And that's just the way that I operated, and that's the way that I went about things. And you know, and so I trouble never stopped, you know, in my life. You know, punishment never stopped. Rejection never stopped. Isolation never stopped. Feeling lonely never stopped. Feeling inadequate never stopped. Feeling insecure never stopped. Feeling disconnected from everything all the time never stopped. And then I found my first drug, which was alcohol. And ironically, there was one person in my life, was my grandfather, that I actually felt some little bit of connection with and felt safe around him. And it was the weekend of his funeral, which was the first weekend ever that we'd been left at home alone, us 3 kids. I grew up in Griffith. That my parents went to Sydney and left us in Griffith, myself, my older sister and my younger sister. And that was the first night I tried alcohol. And I remember a lot of people ask me, why did you start? Like, why did you start taking drugs? And most people in this room tonight are taking a drug, you know. There's nothing wrong with drugs, you know. We all use them, huh? 15 already, shit. We all use them, and so there was these cans of beer in the fridge, in the laundry, and I remember being curious about them, and then one day I just had one. And all those feelings and all that stuff that I was experiencing in my life, all that disconnection, all that feeling of separation, all those feelings of awkwardness and stuff just went away just like that. It was like, this is who I am. So the difference when I have a drug and when other people have a drug is when I have a drug, I become the experience and I get the illusion that I've discovered the real me. It wasn't like I was having a drug and I thought, well, it's me under the influence of drug. I don't have that experience. I believe that experience is who I am. So I went through this. I drank alcoholically from day one. I didn't know I was alcoholic till I had my first drink. I didn't know that I was going to be addicted to other drugs. I didn't know I had an addiction until things just progressed and progressed and progressed and progressed. And I went through all the drugs. I went from alcohol to pot, from pot to speed, from speed to injecting speed, from injecting speed to using heroin, from smoking heroin to injecting heroin, from injecting heroin to using pills, to using acid and trips and mushrooms and stuff like that, and then to basically just injecting anything that would dissolve. So if it can dissolve, I'd heat it up. From Seropax to Valium to Rohypnol to Phyceptone to wine to whiskey to... I remember once I smoked a joint and I dipped the roach in water and squeezed it into a spoon and hit that up. And generally the syringes I was using were syringes that I found in the street. They were, as long as the plunger still worked, things would be fine. So I remember going through Belmore Park up near Central Station and looking through Belmore Park for a syringe, and I found one, and I remember going up into the Central Station toilet and sharpening the syringe on the side of the wall, going into the bowl to get some water from the syringe, mixing up this thing on the dirty little hole on the floor that I found. And I remember sitting there in that toilet. I was trying to find a vein. I had blood pouring down my arm. I was crying. I was desperate. I was sort of hanging out. I was sick. I'd had all the hepatitis. I didn't know I'd had hepatitis once, let alone all of them, by the time I sort of got tested when I got into recovery. And I was just so distraught and so broken and just so devastated as a human being and where I was. And from that first drink to that day, there's a lot of drama and a lot of stuff, and there was prison and rehabs and homelessness. I was homeless for probably 3 or 4 years. I spent a lot of time living in public toilets or living beside public toilets. I never needed a reason to use a drug. My life revolved around getting the next drug, whether it was from a GP, whether it was from a publican, whether it was from a drug dealer. It was irrelevant. My goal was to get the next drug, regardless of where I was, what my circumstances were, who we were around. I ended up, my only possessions were a pair of shorts and a T-shirt, or underpants. I had underpants. And a pair of undies, a pair of shorts and a T-shirt. And I didn't have shoes. I remember one stage I kind of have a blackout. I was wearing, the sprinter shoes, but without the spikes in them. And I'm walking around in them. And I come out of a blackout in a courthouse once, in Brisbane Courthouse. The judge was actually talking to me as I was coming out of the blackout, and I remember asking around. It was like a scene out of Getting Square. I'm going, where am I? What courthouse is this? I come out of blackouts in cells, in police cells. I come out of blackouts bruised and beaten. I come out of blackouts with blood all down my face. I come out of blackouts in overturned cars, or one overturned car. I'd get a script in Penrith. I'd come to 4 days later on the Gold Coast. It was just crazy. And I started to go to rehabs. I robbed our house, our parents' house, and that was my first. My first experience of any type of guilt or remorse or shame or stuff that I actually felt, that I noticed I felt, because I probably felt it all the time, but that I noticed I felt. And I remember trying to suicide. I swallowed $800 worth of heroin in paper envelopes, because if I swallow the heroin, the envelopes will dissolve, and then the heroin will release, and that'll be enough to overdose me. And I went up to this park near our house, and I'm lying there in these trees, and I'm thinking, I'll just lie here and I'll die. And this jogger, for some reason, I don't know, who jogs at 3:30 in the morning? This jogger was jogging through the park at 3:30 in the morning, and he disturbed me. And he says, "What are you doing, mate?" You know? And I said, "I'm trying to die." And I just got up then and I walked home, and I got home. Mum was at the sewing machine for some reason at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I went inside, I went to bed, I'm lying there, nothing's happening. So I got up and got some razor blades out of the kitchen, out of the bathroom, sorry. I started to open up my wrists, and I remember seeing all the veins all exposed, and I thought, one more cut and it's done, and it's over. You know? And at the time, I was quite okay with that. I was like, it's over, it's finished. And I blacked out at that moment. And I woke up in the morning, my parents come in, said, "Did you rob the house?" I said, "Yes, I robbed the house." I threw the sheets back, there was like blood everywhere, they freaked out, they kicked me out of the house. I saw Dad take off in his car up to a mate of mine's place because it was his fault, so my man had to go and sort the bloke out that I was using drugs with, because if he sorted him out for something in his mind, I'd be okay. So, but at this stage they were probably quite frazzled and distraught and had no idea probably what to do or how to cope or how to do anything about me anyway. So, and that was the first time I went to rehab. So I was desperate at the time. I remember going in saying, "Just keep an open mind, just keep an open mind, just keep an open mind." And I stayed there for 3 months. I didn't want to be an addict anymore, so I thought as long as I need noodles again, I'll be all right. So we left and shot up 200 Ritalin, I think, that night. I was in and out of that rehab 8 times, or 7 times. The 8th time was, this time I went back, it was the 8th time. I was in 3 different prisons. Got to wrap it up. But so I haven't used a drug since the 19th of August 1980, alcohol or any other drug, since the 19th of August 1985, which is just over just over 34 years ago. And I think just in that time I've been able to I've been around people who understand who I am, you know, and I felt misunderstood in my life. And I spend most of my life with other people in recovery that are actually suffering from the same thing and working through the same thing. So I need to hear the truth all the time, because if I don't hear the truth, I'll believe the lie, and the lie is one won't hurt. And for me, it's the first drug that does the damage, whether it's the first mouthful, the first smoke, the first whatever it is, starts that whole process. Then I know if I have the first one, the addiction has the rest. And the addiction doesn't stop, and it's relentless, and it's painful, and I wish I had like another hour to talk. But I've been lucky. I've worked in rehabs. I worked for corrective services for 17 years. I'm now out at Broken Hill working with the Royal Flying Doctor Service. We fly around to remote clinics around the place. It's a great organisation to work for. They let me set my own roster. I fly into places, I just hang around town, talk to people, you know, I have sessions walking down the main street, under trees, in amongst sheep, you know, like sitting on top of roofs, you know, so we have I'm unbelievably lucky, unbelievably privileged, and I feel incredibly blessed to have been given an opportunity, I suppose, in my life to come from where I've come to what I've been able to achieve today. And I really want to thank everyone for being here and supporting Behind the Smile, because it's actually incredible, and the people who do the work behind the scenes are amazing, and thanks for listening to me. Thanks very much.